Ready, Josh?
Everyone, I'd like to call this meeting to order on June 16th at 4:01. Council, any additions or deletions to today's agenda? I do have one, if I can ask the Deputy Mayor to step in for the adoption of the agenda. I'd like to add a discussion item regarding the vacant peace officer position. And quickly, generally I don't like adding an additional action item or discussion item at a meeting, but since the timing that we've posted for this position publicly, I think it's worth at least a quick discussion to see if we have any options on, discussing and perhaps moving forward in a different way, if there's any appetite of council. As this was spoken about in the past. And if not, it should be a quick conversation. But I'd like to add that as a discussion item, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, and council, is there any other additions or deletions? Seeing none, okay, administration?
None from administration, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm looking for someone to adopt the agenda. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we adopt the regular meeting of council agenda for Tuesday, June 16th, 2020, as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. All right, we'll call that to question. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Back to you, Mayor Michaels. Thank
you, Deputy Mayor Haas, for that. Council, we have minutes for adoption. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Nelson.
Thanks. A couple, I'd emailed them to council earlier, but on May 19th, Councillor Stashik blipped out for a bit when we were doing the adoption of the agenda and council minutes for adoption. And that's not reflected, and it shows carried unanimously, but he wasn't able to vote on those. And then the other one is on, just pulling it up here. On May 26th, we added an in-camera item where it talks about continuation of personnel discussion from May 17th. Although that was the direction that was made, and that's what it was added as, and council approved it, the discussion was actually subsequent to a conversation from May 19th. May 17th was a Sunday, so I'm not sure how we fix or amend those, but just a couple things that need to be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. For the second part, I just want to corroborate. To my knowledge, it was Councillor Race who made the comment that it was May 17th, and I think she intended to say May 19th. As the meeting date. Councillor Race, do you recall that?
I do recall that.
Okay, perfect. So that answers the first part. Now I'll go to Ms. Olson, Ms. Olson or administration regarding making these amendments to the minutes. Can we just make that verbally?
We can. It was noted previous to this meeting that both of those are correct. So
okay.
Be amended.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. And thank you, Councillor Nelson, for bringing that forward. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes as amended, reflecting that the date mentioned was on the May 26th was indeed for May 19th and not the 17th of May. And that the first part, that Councillor Stashik was not present for that motion. Anything further, Council, regarding the minutes? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that we, oh boy. Sorry, I've got two screens going here. Move that we adopt the regular meeting of council minutes May 19th, 2020 as discussed, standing committee of council meetings May 26th, 2020 as discussed, and standing committee of council minutes June 9th, 2020 as discussed.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? And seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That was passed unanimously. Thank you very much. That brings us to our no citizens minute with council. Okay, my apologies. And now it will be the public hearing, and I'll hand it over to our Deputy Mayor, Mr. Haas.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Right. So this is the public hearing on bylaw number 1088-14. The following public hearing is held pursuant to section 692 of the Municipal Government Act, being chapter M-26 RSA 2000 and amendments thereto. The following rules of conduct will be followed during this public hearing. Presentation should be brief and to the point. The order of presentation shall be report from the Planning and Development Manager as attachment 1, entry of written submissions, those supporting the bylaw, those opposing the bylaw, and any other person deemed to be affected by the bylaw. Council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification purposes. There will be no debating the bylaw. However, questions to the councillors or other parties will be accepted through the chair. I hereby declare the public hearing relating to the bylaw open. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of the proposed bylaw number 108814 is to amend the land use bylaw as follows. Amend section 2-1, authority responsibilities, as shown on attachment 2, overview of amendments. First reading was given to bylaw number 1088-14 on May 19th, 2020. Notice of this public hearing was advertised in the Hinton Voice newspaper on May 28th and June 4th, 2020, and advertised on the Town of Hinton website.
All right, the purpose of this report is to establish the Director of Development Services as a planning authority for the municipality, to exercise subdivision and development powers and designate the duties to any other person. Council's authorization of the Director of Development Services with the required delegation authority provides flexibility to delegate duties where necessary to ensure sustainability and to provide more efficient customer service. At the time of writing this report, no submissions, verbal or written, have been received. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Are there any other late written submissions relating to the bylaw number 1088-14?
No.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of bylaw number 1088-14? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition to bylaw number 1088-14? All right, and is there anyone present who is deemed to be affected by bylaw number 1088-14 and wishes to speak? All right, do the councillors have any further questions on this bylaw? Do the councillors require any further information?
Councillor Nelson.
Councillor Nelson. Yeah, I just had a question. If somebody was deemed affected or had feedback, what way, because this is the first public hearing I think we've done in the Zoom era, what method could citizens have joined or could join in the future for public hearings?
C.A. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when this public hearing was advertised to the public, there was a process that was included in that information to direct members of the public should they have wish to speak on behalf of this bylaw, either for it or against it, that they contact our executive assistant to schedule in for this meeting to do so. So that was communicated in our advertisements and online as well. So in the future, should we have a public hearing that is conducted by Zoom, it would be the same process followed.
Perfect. I appreciate that clarification. And when people look back on public hearings, it's good to have that on the public record as the advertisements kind of go by the wayside. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, CA Olson. All right. Is there any other further information from council? Right, if none, then if not, I hereby declare that the public hearing relating to bylaw number 1088-14 is closed, and then we'll accept the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like a motion to end the public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. All right, to end this public hearing, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, I'll hand it back over to you, Mayor Michaels.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hawes. That'll bring us to our delegations and presentations for today. We have one RCMP annual report, and I'll hand it off to our Staff Sergeant, Chris Murphy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council, Administration. I want to thank you all for giving me the time to come provide the Hinton RCMP Detachment annual update. It's been quite some time since I've been before Mayor and Council to provide this update, and unfortunately today it's via Zoom. With that being said, I still thought it was important to come before you to provide a bit of a snapshot of this last several months and also our forecast for the coming months. And most importantly, to allow everyone the opportunity to ask me any questions or express any concerns that they may have. Wendy, if you wouldn't mind hitting the next slide, that'd be great.
Doing a full screen for you.
So my presentation today is going to follow like my other presentations, both written and in person. So I will discuss the resource and staffing levels of the Hinton RCMP Detachment. I will speak to the detachment priorities for the fiscal years of 2020, 2021. I will speak to the crime trends and statistics in which we're seeing here in Hinton. I want to speak quickly on COVID-19. And again, most importantly, I want to answer any questions that anybody may have. Next slide, please. So with respect to staffing levels, I don't know if I've ever been able to say this in my time in the RCMP, but I can say currently all municipal positions are filled. We have members in each and every single position. They are healthy, they are coming to work. So that's a very positive for me. It was very positive coming into the COVID time to be able to have these positions filled and to be able to respond accordingly. Much like in the RCMP world, however, we do have transfers that are forthcoming. 2 of them will be occurring this summer. Replacements for both have already been identified. I'll be receiving 1 member from the Stony Plain Spruce Grove area, an experienced member coming to Hinton. He'll be here later this month. And then I will be receiving another experienced member from British Columbia, and they will be arriving upon the sale of their house. No timeline at this point in time. So there may be a period of time where I'm running a single vacancy. However, the positive is that the replacement has already been identified and the process to sell his house has already started. Next slide, please. So I'll probably spend the most time discussing the priorities. So starting early in January, we started consulting with the community groups, various boards or groups that we were attending, presentations, the general public, coffee with a cop. We also hosted a town hall meeting. So in all of these different venues, we solicited input from different residents, different groups as to what they would like to see the priorities be, what their concerns are when it comes to policing. So from an RCMP perspective, a lot of the feedback I received surrounded property crime. That was very similar to the years past, very specific this year to break-in enters. And when I say break and enter, that's into either a residence or a dwelling house or to a business. So going into a vehicle would not be considered a break and enter under the criminal code. That would be considered theft or theft from a motor vehicle. But it's very specific to having individuals break into either homes or break into places of business. And that was a concern that was voiced. And it was a concern that I also shared. And for anybody who attended the town hall meeting, that was one of the statistics we were following very, very closely because it was at a 5-year high, the amount of break-in enters we were experiencing. So with that feedback that I received with respect to property crime, the other area that was discussed on occasion was traffic and some of the traffic concerns throughout town, usually centered around speeding or distracted driving were the big concerns. We did also have some concerns more in our rural area of impaired driving expressed to us. So that also played a role in our priorities for this upcoming year. So the priorities are going to be broken down into two objectives. One is community consultation. I feel it's very important. I've said this to you previously, that we continue to communicate with the community. And we are doing so in a number of ways. And that's number one, and probably most importantly, is getting out and being involved in various groups and boards. But number two, giving the residents an opportunity to come and speak to us, either through the venue of Coffee with a Cop, which saw mixed results, but also with the town hall meeting as well, that provided people the opportunity to provide us some feedback. I can tell you we will continue with both of these initiatives, but they will look different moving forward. And specifically at the end of the summer, we're monitoring COVID like everybody else. So there is a very strong possibility that our next town hall meeting is going to be virtual. We give everyone the opportunity virtually to be able to come on board. This has been piloted at another detachment, and they actually had really good results with it. It seemed like people were more willing to participate in something when they didn't actually have to come to a venue outside of their house. Some people struggle with transportation or whatnot. This just gives everybody that has the opportunity to engage, I guess, in social media, so some form of a connection or platform to be able to participate. So moving forward, we're going to give it a try as well. That date will likely be in the fall, in September, October. With that town hall meeting, I'll be providing an update with respect to the statistics, which I'll be talking about here soon, and how the first half of the year or 3/4 of the year has progressed and any accomplishments we've made with respect to the priorities, but also to give some feedback, because I think it's important to give the continual, or give the opportunity for them to be able to let us know what their concerns are, because it could have changed in the last 6 to 8 months. So those two will continue with the community consultation. The next area is crime reduction. This one's a little bit more extensive. This was, again, based a lot on the feedback we received from the various groups and individuals in the community, but also looking at our statistics and speaking to the police officers. We all felt within the Hinton RCMP detachment that we needed to focus and do a better job with reducing the break-in enters that are occurring in this area. So there's a very specific goal in this year, and it's to reduce break-in enters by 7% as compared to 2019. 2019, again, for anybody who had been to my previous presentations, saw numbers that we have never seen for a number of years. We were high across the board, whether it was property crime, persons crimes. It was the highest numbers that we'd seen in the last 5 years, with the amount of complaints and investigations that we had. Most concerning out of all those was break-in enters. So we are going to be looking to reduce break-in enters this coming year by 7%. In addition to that, we want to increase the clearance rates of break-in enters by 26%. So in saying that, we want to not only reduce it, but the calls that are coming in, we want to make sure that we are doing everything we possibly can to solve these crimes and to hold these people accountable. And so we will be looking to clear all our break-in enters by 26%. And I'll be able to provide that update. We're almost done the first quarter. It will be at the end of June here, and I'll have an update on how we're making out thus far in my next police advisory committee meeting. I want to see the increase in the number of search warrants we're executing here in Hinton increase as compared to years past. And the next one goes into more of the traffic. We want to see a decrease in traffic fatalities, injuries, and property damage collisions across the board here in Hinton. So those are some of the measures and some of the objectives we have with respect to crime reduction. I won't go into all of the initiatives that we're going to be employing. I will touch on some of them, but I won't specify some of our investigative strategies to deal with those. But I do think it's important to mention we will continue with our habitual offender management program. We've seen mixed success in the last year and a half with respect to that program. The update I received last week, we have 2 individuals in this program participating in this program, and both of them are actually agreeing to and complying with the conditions that have been placed upon them. And they're actually at a position in their life where they are seeking our assistance and the assistance of our partner agencies to stop the underlying roots or the reasons for their offending behavior. And so, again, for each one, it's a little bit different. For some, it may be housing, it may be employment, it may be addictions, it may be mental health. Each individual is a bit different, but we're making sure that the referrals are made and that the person is receiving the help that they require. The second thing that we've really focused on this year is what we call hotspots or crime mapping. So I've presented on this a couple of times with respect to our weekly crime mapping and mapping out specific crimes that are occurring here in the community. We also use this as a tool to identify which areas in town are what we consider to be the hotspots, so the areas where we're receiving the most complaints. I can tell you we've seen some success by doing this. We do it on a weekly basis now, so we're doing it week by week, and what we're doing is trying to put the right resources in the right location at the right time. One example I'll give, and I won't mention any names, but there was a certain area that had commercial accommodations that we were experiencing a lot of complaints, and we focused a lot of members in that area. We also worked with the management of that establishment to try to stop some of the complaints and some of the behavior and actions that were occurring in that area, and we saw some success with that. So we'll continue throughout this whole year to continue on a weekly basis, identifying hotspots and making sure our crime mapping is up to date. Going hand in hand with that, we've already started our bike patrols this year. Those have been out, and you're going to see a big increase in our foot patrol. So I talked about having all of our positions filled and the benefits of that. So being able to have our members out on foot in a safe manner is very important. And they have already conducted numerous foot patrols in some of our high crime areas to thus far in the year, positive results. Third area, again, that we're going to focus on, so enforcement is one aspect of it, but public education communication is important, whether it's through media releases or virtual presentations, or hopefully down the road in-person presentations again. Working with the community to make it that much more difficult for people to be committing offenses within our community. Again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I know you've heard it from me numerous times, but I've stressed the importance of the community coming together to make it difficult for offenders to commit crimes. I've been really impressed with what I have seen here within the community. We are at an all-time high for the amount of complaints being called in of suspicious vehicles, suspicious persons, and it's giving us an opportunity to get to certain locations in a timely manner and hopefully limit the amount of crimes that are occurring. And I'll talk about the stats here soon and some of the declines we've seen in some of the areas. So I, again, feel very strongly in the public education and communication piece. Moving forward, again, we're going to work with the traffic enforcement, doing our check stops, doing our joint force operations with the peace officers here in Hinton. Ourselves and the peace officers have created a traffic safety working group with the first meeting occurring the 18th of this month, where we're all going to come together with the ultimate goal, again, of making our streets safer. And it brings all the parties to the table, commercial vehicles, our Hinton peace officers, the RCMP, and potentially Yellowhead County peace officers to discuss the current trends, what we're seeing as a group, and coming together with some strategies, again, to deal with some of the concerns. And then finally, another aspect of our priorities is making sure that I continue to get the members in Hinton the proper training for various things. So I talked about judicial authorizations or search warrants. That's a very technical aspect of the job, and it's very important for the members to have the specific training in that area. And we are focused on getting those members. We've had great success in getting our members training. And that goes hand in hand with intelligence-led policing and making sure that we're utilizing, not collecting stats for the sake of collecting stats, but actually looking at this information and seeing exactly what it means and what we can do with it to offer a better service to the community. Next slide, please. Crime trend statistics. So again, for those that came to the town hall meeting, 2019 was not a good year. We were high across the board with persons crimes, property crimes, criminal code, all 5-year highs. So I have statistics here today from January to the end of May. So went to May 31st. And so thus far this year, we have seen a 37% decrease in persons crimes. We've had a 13% decrease in property crime, a 58% decrease in other criminal code offenses, 59% decrease in the amount of break-in enters, which results into 22 fewer instances, a 14% decrease in theft under 5,000 with 15 fewer instances. One area that's remained fairly consistent is theft from motor vehicle. There hasn't been much of a change. Going into COVID in March, again, we expected to see certain areas spike. Family violence related calls was one concern that we had initially. I can tell you, I'm pretty proud of Hinton and the residents here in this community, because our community we did fairly well compared to other communities in a lot of areas. We didn't see the increases like we expected to see. And I think it's for a number of reasons. And one of them being the supports that are in place here within the community, the different agencies and everybody stepping up and adapting as they needed to. With respect to property crime, I think we had a lot of people staying at home, and which was making it a lot more difficult for some of our offenders to commit the offenses. I saw a lot of work being done on residences to, again, hopefully make it a little bit more difficult for them to be victimized. We've seen some funding coming in from various levels of government, so people were able to pay their bills, and that was a positive. We have been closely monitoring it right from March 20th to now, because we did at some point in time expect to see numbers start to increase, and unfortunately in the last 3 weeks or so we're starting to see those numbers climb again. So we do forecast and history as being an indicator is usually when the economy is struggling, we in the policing world see an increase across the board, usually because that relates in more stress to a lot more people, which would relate to potentially addictions, mental health, and then property crime or potentially persons crime. So although the numbers were really good right till the end of May, we're watching things closely. The last 7 days alone, we've had 96 calls for service, which has increased quite a bit. We went for a period of time where we were in the 60s during those COVID months, so it's jumped a bit in the last week. In comparison, from January 1st to June 9th, in 2020, we responded to 1,842 complaints. In 2019, we responded to 2,215. So overall, we were down about 300 complaints to June 9th. We'll continue to monitor things. And again, it's just very important to me and to the RCMP that we are prepared for a potential increase, and that the members are able to respond to any increases that we do see. And hopefully, again, getting out there in a proactive manner to reduce these numbers. And my hope is when I present, the next one will be written, that you'll see that we are reaching some of our targets, and hopefully have some success stories for you. Next slide, please. I want to talk shortly on COVID-19 and then one other area, and I'll turn it over to questions. So with respect to COVID-19, the RCMP, like many agencies and municipalities, created certain policies and procedures in place to protect the safety of our members, but also to the public itself. So throughout this entire time, I did have 2 members that were tested for COVID-19 due to the symptoms they were displaying. Both of them came back negative. PPE and protocols have been in place right from March on. We initially had a leave restriction where no members, RCMP members, were allowed any leave whatsoever. So that was just lifted here in June. So what that allowed me, again, is having a schedule that was completely filled, and going back to the point of having each position filled. It was great. We had a lot of members out patrolling, so the visibility was really good, and we were able to commit members to certain areas. Our general investigation section was out in plainclothes status throughout the community, being eyes and ears for us. So it was very, very beneficial. Since then, the leave restriction has been lifted. Alberta RCMP continues to make assessments as to when the detachment will reopen. I don't have the specifics on that right now, and what services will be provided. The number one being the safety, again, of the public and the safety of our staff at the detachment. Once that information is known to me, there will be extensive media releases going out to the public so they know. I just do want to emphasize, though, our services have not stopped. The only thing that has changed is that the front door to our detachment is locked, and there's a screening process in place. We are not doing as many criminal record checks or fingerprints, but any other calls for service is still business as normal and has been from March. We're still responding to things. And again, we have staff answering the phones during the day. I do expect to see some changes here in the near future when it comes to criminal record checks and fingerprinting, and hopefully we'll have that information soon. Next slide, please. Emergency preparedness, because I always speak about this every time I present, and again, believe very strongly in that we need to be prepared to deal with emergencies. I can tell you COVID-19, there were some lessons learned within our organization as well. We have a lot of policies and procedures in place. COVID-19, there was no plan for us. But again, like so many others, we adapted and quickly came up with policies and procedures. But one aspect of the members, and I'm going to speak of Hinton Detachment specifically, is not only were we able to respond and continue offering services, but we also took that one step further in making sure that we were prepared to deal with any other emergencies during a pandemic. So we have to be able to respond to that crime in progress. We have to be able to respond to that active shooter. We would have to be able to respond to an evacuation, and making sure that we were able to do so in a manner that was safe during a pandemic. And so we did some tabletops, and some additional policies were created as a result. And then finally, as we move forward, we'll continue with our incident command system training of all our members here in Hinton Detachment. And this fall, be working with search and rescue for a mock scenario that we'll be working hand in hand with them to again, prepare the members and practice to be ready for any future emergencies. Next slide, please. And that's it. Questions. Thank you for your patience listening to me speak.
Thank you, staff. Great information. So any questions for Mr. Murphy? Councillor Hawes.
Thank you. One, thank you again for the presentation, of course. And I'm just wondering, I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot too of bike thefts. Is that something we're seeing more of, or is that just something that it's commonly happens at this time of the year? And of course, we've talked a lot about protecting yourself. So just the message out there to make sure even your bike locked is not necessarily safe at night, but keeping it inside if you can, indoors, something like that. But have we seen an increase in that, especially during the COVID, situation?
During COVID, not so much. The last 2 weeks, yes. So we have seen a bit of an increase, and a lot of it on social media. Again, we're encouraging sometimes, because we do monitor social media as well. We have found a lot of times that we might find something on social media, but no complaint has been made to us. We had success with recovering 2 of the bikes that had significant media attention. The one gentleman who was traveling through our area, we managed to recover his bike that had been stolen. And there was another recent one for a person from Jasper. The bike was stolen in Jasper, and we recovered here in Hinton. Last 2 weeks, we have seen that. I do like the idea of pushing out another media release. A lot of these bikes locks aren't being cut. A lot of times it's, again, a crime of opportunity where they're seeing these bikes, even entering your backyard. Your backyard might be closed, but they see the bikes laying there going in. We have increased our foot patrols, trying to recover some of these bikes in these strategic locations. We also work hand in hand with our peace officers here, because they get quite a few calls when it comes to bikes as well, and making sure that we're on the same page. And finally, with respect to that, I do have one member that's taking the initiative to come up with a program to record serial numbers and to have it. There's an app that is out there that we're going to introduce to Hinton, because this is a year after year thing. This isn't new to this year, as everybody knows, being in this community. And so it's something I think that we need to spend a little bit more time on, and spend more efforts on the preventative side of things, and registering these bikes, having these serial numbers. Because a lot of times we will get complaints made, but it's just a very vague description with no serial number. And it makes it very difficult for us to be able to prove a bike is 100% stolen without that information. So valid point. I do like the idea of some messaging going out, and I've made a note of that. Thank you.
No, that's great. And the app is fantastic, because, at one point bikes were not the most expensive things in your yard, but nowadays you get thousands, $2,000, $3,000 worth of bikes there. So appreciate it. And an app would be great to at least have that serial number again. So I do have other questions if there is anybody, but if there's others in the queue.
No, go ahead, Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I just was curious, with everything going on, has our members, I know worldly police officers are, being looked at, but even just our neighbor in Edmonton, a lot of different discussions going on. I know that their chief was just at their council meeting not long ago. And, have you seen any, blowback from our communities, our officers seeing anything, I guess, and as if there's any way of supporting our local detachment in any way?
Oh, thank you. I won't speak of any specific incidents. I can tell you, yes, it's had an impact on police members. I'd be lying to say it didn't. It's been a tough few weeks for police officers. With that being said, I'm really proud of the members here. Positive attitude within the detachment here. I think it's a prime opportunity for us to continue to showcase, to remain professional, to do our job properly, to treat people properly. And the members are still coming to work. I haven't had any blowback with respect to, someone not wanting to respond to that call or not go to that thing. Members expect, a level of opposition, period. We've had that throughout our entire career. I think, again, what is really important is, and we've emphasized this again, is to continue doing our job in a professional manner. There's a lot of people out there that do support us, and this community is no exception. And again, we just have to continue going out there and doing the right thing. We have had a few encounters here again locally, but it hasn't impacted the members. I'm proud of the response I've seen from the detachment here.
Okay, great. I just was curious on how that was going. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council? And if not, Staff Sergeant Murphy, thank you. We have an amazing Hinton detachment here. Something that I hear all the time, and I like to personally thank you on behalf of council, is you're very approachable. People say that you're not only approachable to council administration, but to our residents. And that to me is leadership at the top. So thank you so much for doing that. And we're looking forward to the virtual town hall expanding. I think people will feel more comfortable. Not everyone can attend. So and focusing on break-in and enters publicly and reassuring the community that you're there listening is all we can ask for. And we look forward to the presence that you had mentioned earlier throughout the summer. And that's really it. So thank you so much for all you do, especially during these critical times.
Thank you. I'll pass it on. Thank you.
All right, that'll bring us to our first action item for this evening, Council. Land Use Bylaw Amendment 1088-14, CAO Olson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Currently, the LUB does not allow for the delegation of powers and duties related to subdivision or development authority by the Development Services Director on behalf of the municipality. The change that's presented in Bylaw Amendment 1088-14 would support that best practice in allowing this delegation and would provide for consistent customer service from the Development Services Division. On May 19th, Council gave first reading to this bylaw amendment, and the public hearing requirement for the change was achieved earlier in this meeting. To proceed with the amendment, the recommended action tonight is that Council give the final two readings of Land Use Bylaw Amendment 1088-14. Mr. Gannon and I are pleased to receive any questions that Council might have.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, just a kind of a high-level question. Understanding the amendment allows this to be able to be delegated to anybody within the town of Hinton. How are we mitigating the risk, or how are we ensuring that we're achieving quality, not just speed?
Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Nelson. I think this question may be best answered by Mr. Vanna, and I will look to him to support an answer if that's okay.
Thank you, CEO Olson. So through to Councillor Nelson, the way we ensure that happens is that we have policy and procedures and practice sheets in terms of how things are processed, so that anyone who is delegated that authority has access to that and works through that. kind of a process. Part of this amendment has also been that we have restructured in the department and have in fact streamlined some of the way we do things so that we do have overlapping services, so to ensure that consistency of service, which didn't necessarily have before. And so that also helps in terms of cross training and ensuring that we have consistent service.
Thank you, Mr. Vanna. CEO Olson. Councillor Nelson, anything further?
No, that's perfect. I really appreciate that we're looking towards flexibility and understanding whether it's, staffing shortages due to a pandemic or just a general, hopefully we get to a point where things are busy when it comes to planning development and we need that flexibility. So just understanding that there's tools in place to reduce the risk and make sure it goes smoothly is great. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to make the motion that council gives second reading of Land Use Bylaw 1088-14.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor for second reading. Any further debate or questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council gives second reading to Land Use Bylaw 1088-14. Council, all those in favor? And that was passed unanimously. Council, anything further? Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that council give third reading of Land Use Bylaw 1088-14. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, once again, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate or questions for administration? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council gives third reading to Land Use Bylaw 1088-14. Council, all those in favor? And that was passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this action item? Oh, Councillor Race.
Oh, no, you know what I was going to say, wouldn't we need unanimous, but we've done first reading already, so my apologies.
No worries. Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, anything further for this item? And seeing none, thank you, CEO Olson and Mr. Vanna. Our second action item, Safety Codes Permit Bylaw 1148. CEO Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. In April of this year, council received a report from administration seeking approval of the town of Hinton becoming an accredited safety code services provider. Motion supporting the service and the use of a third-party accredited agency to perform the inspections required were carried earlier this year. The next step in this process is to pass bylaw 1148 to establish the application procedure, and fees for permits are created in the next action item tonight as well. Administration is seeking all three readings for this item in the interest of time, as to meet budgets for the safety code revenue that was projected through the budget process. An August start would be necessary. At this time, recommended action is to proceed with all three readings tonight. Mr. Vanna and Ms. Walker are here to help answer any questions that council might have regarding this item.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any questions? Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I just want to ask, as I did take a look at some other communities in regards to these, but these are, I'm guessing you looked at communities similar to our size. What are the standard rates that, communities charge when it comes to safety codes and things like that? Am I correct in assuming that?
Administration?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I will defer to Mr. Vanner and Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. So to answer that question, yes, so what we've taken the model that many municipalities across Alberta use this kind of a service model where they contract out to an agency. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel here. So what we've done is we retain the services of a consultant that works across the province to craft us a bylaw that deals with all the requirements of becoming an agency, and also in terms of looking at the fees, because it also translates into the next topic, which is really, in order for us to contract out to one of these agencies, they typically look at, are the fees consistent and are they similar to other municipalities in terms of across the board.
Thank you, Mr. Vanna. Councillor Hawes, anything further?
Nope, that's all. Thank you.
Council, anything further for administration? And if not, I will entertain a motion if that's the will of council. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that council give first reading of safety codes permit bylaw 1148. If I can speak to it, since well before our election, a lot of the inspection services has been something that the town citizens have really wanted and businesses have wanted, and creates that flexibility. So this is great. I look forward to probably a year from now having an amendment to this as we learn from it and as we evolve, but I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a motion on the floor now. Any further debate or questions for administration? Councillor Magoon.
No debate. I just, like Councillor Nelson, I think this is an important enough area to speak on briefly. I agree that this is a service that we're bringing to the town. It's certainly not one of those sexy items, but it's something that we all, or at least a large number of citizens in town rely on. And I think this is value added, and it comes with its own fiscal benefits. So my hat's off to the town and administration for developing this plan. And again, I think reviewing it in a year, we can see what needs to be tweaked and making it a more living process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon, and I share a lot of the same sentiments. Council, anything further? Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I just want to also say too, like this is for the, of course for contractors and others, but I mean others for residents as well, to streamline this, to not make the process, of a deck or whatever, a lot of work for them, I think is going to be a great benefit as well. Along with, of course, the contractors, but I too have heard many comments about this throughout the years in Hinton, and I'm so happy to see this coming back to Hinton and making it a better service for our community members. So I just wanted to say that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, anything further? And seeing none, then I will call to question that council give first reading of safety codes permit bylaw 1148. Council, all those in favor? That was passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this action item today? Councillor Haas.
I'd like to move that we give second reading to the safety codes permit bylaw 1148, please.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, again, we have a motion on the floor for second reading. Any questions or debates? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council give second reading for safety codes of bylaw permit 1148. Council, all those in favor? That is also passed unanimously. Council, Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that council give unanimous consent for third and final reading of safety codes permit bylaw number 1148.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor to give unanimous consent to go to third reading today. Any debate or questions? And seeing none from council, I'll call to question that council give unanimous consent for third and final reading of safety codes permit bylaw 1148. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously, and that will bring us to the third reading. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council give safety code permit bylaw 1148 third reading.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council gives third reading of safety codes permit bylaw 1148. Council, all those in favor? And again, that was passed unanimously. Anything further for this action item, council? And seeing none, thank you, C.A. Olson, Mr. Vanna, and Ms. Walker. And that will bring us to our third action item for this evening, development service fees bylaw 1104-3, C.A. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. As mentioned with the previous item, this bylaw is before council tonight for all three readings in order to provide a framework for fees and charges related to the town providing safety code services as an accredited agency. Our development services team members, as previous, are here to assist me in answering any of council's questions. And the recommended action tonight is for council to give all three readings.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to administration. I believe I know the answer on this. Ms. Olson, can I assume that if this were to not receive all 3 readings tonight, that would actually delay the implementation of the whole procedure that we're looking to unfurl tonight?
Ms. Olson?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Magoon. It would affect our timelines. To what degree, I would have to defer to Mr. Vanna, but it is for council tonight with all 3 readings as a recommendation so that we can meet as closely as possible our projected revenues from that service.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Councillor Magoon, anything further on that?
No, Your Worship. I'll wait and see if any other councillors have any questions, but I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion if that's the will of council. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that council give first reading of Development Services Fees Bylaw 1104-3. I can speak to it. I haven't heard any concerns yet about the fees, and I don't know that we will until the rubber hits the road with them. And if things need to be adjusted moving forward, I think we have that opportunity. And it's not a huge issue to amend this part, especially it's not the full bylaw, it's just the fees portion of it. So again, I look forward to learning from this and figuring out how to move forward in future years and future amendments. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a motion on the floor for first reading. Any debate or questions for administration? I myself share the same thought pattern as Councillor Nelson for this, so I'm just happy to get this started. And with no one further on the question list, I'll call to question that council give first reading of Development Services Fees Bylaw 1104-3. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To administration, with this bylaw being out in the community and contractors, people being able to read it, have you had any phone calls or conversations with people in the community? Any concerns regarding this?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'll defer to Mr. Vanna.
Mr. Mayor, we haven't received any comments on this. As I say, the fees that are here contained in here are consistent with those across other jurisdictions and what other agencies actually charge.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Olson and Mr. Vanna. Councillor Race, anything further on that?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that council gives second reading of Development Services Fee Bylaw number 1104-3. And just briefly, I just want to express my appreciation to administration on reaching out and getting a feel for the best practices in terms of what the fees are in other jurisdictions. I think it's helpful to us. It gets us closer to a solid target for Hinton. And know with other areas that the town offers, that has been a concern. So it makes things a lot easier in interfacing with the public right off the get-go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion for second reading. Any debate or questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council gives second reading of Development Services Fees Bylaw 1104-3. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, any appetite for another motion? Councillor Magoon.
Give it a shot, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the council give unanimous consent for third and final reading of Development Services Fees Bylaw number 1104-3.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? And seeing none, I'll call it to question that council give unanimous consent for third and final reading of Development Services Fees Bylaw 1104-3. Council, all those in favor? That is also passed unanimously. That brings us to third reading. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that council give Development Services Fees Bylaw 1104-3 third reading.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? The only thing I'll speak to, and it goes to Councillor Nelson's point earlier, I think it's to monitor this and to do our job as councillors, that if we hear any feedback or any changes needed, to bring that forward for those amendments or potential amendments. But seeing that we have something that is generally close to other communities, I don't foresee that, but that is our role as councillors. So anything further for this third and final reading? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council give third reading of Development Services Fees Bylaw 1104-3. Council, all those in favor? And that was passed unanimously. Anything further for this item, council? And seeing none, thank you, Ms. Olson and Mr. Vanna. That brings us to Employment Principles Policy HR 1905. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. The Employment Principles Policy is one of 4 policies before council tonight to support the cleaning up of outdated and non-compliant human resources policies that were previously approved by council numerous years ago. As previously brought to council last month, there are also 3 current policies that speak to employment principles that require revisions to bring them in line with MGA requirements, current legislative requirements, and municipal best practices. They include personnel policies, salaried staff 027, general 017, and salaried employees 060. At the standing committee meeting on May 12th, the motions related to the rescinding of those policies were moved to return to council for discussion on May 26th, along with the pay principles policy. Administration is seeking approval for the rescinding of these policies, but that request is within the final report tonight with that pay principles policy for this evening. Our HR manager, Ms. Hope, is also here to answer any questions on this item that council may have, and we welcome them now.
Thank you, CAO Olson. Council, any questions? Councillor McGoon.
No questions, Your Worship. I'd like to make the motion that council approves Employment Principles Policy HR 1905 as presented. And just speaking to it briefly, for myself reading through this report, this is just one of those slam dunk areas. We have areas where our policy isn't in line with the MGA at this point in Alberta legislation. And so in this case, I think it's pretty clear cut what we have to do. And I appreciate administration making the necessary changes to town policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions for administration? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council approves Employment Principles Policy HR-1905 as presented. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Again, anything further for this action item, council? And seeing none, thank you, CEO Olson and Ms. Hope. We will go to our 5th action item, Employee Relations Policy HR-1904. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This policy was also reviewed at the May 12th Standing Committee meeting and is before council tonight for approval. The policy incorporates additional areas from the potentially rescinded policies from previous reports to establish employee relations, including organizational practices, expectations, and processes. The policy sets out employer standards for treatment of employees and supports a work ethic that supports learning and developing a work ethic based in mutual trust, respect, courtesy, and tolerance. Tonight, it's before council for approval, and we're happy to receive your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to admin. With this policy, affecting supervisory people, employees, have supervisors and employees had an opportunity to look at this, and does it satisfy their needs? Or is that how we do things?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I believe that this policy has been reviewed at the senior leadership team level. I would look to Ms. Hope to explain if there's any further engagement that's taken place on it.
Ms. Hope.
There was some engagement with other levels than SLT, but the majority of the engagement will happen with the directives that support this policy.
Thank you, Ms. Hope. CEO Olson. Councillor Race, Anything further on that?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that council approves employee relations policy HR 1904 as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate or questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council approves employee relations policy HR-1904 as presented. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this item? Seeing none, we'll move to action item number 6 for this evening, benefit principles policy HR-1903. CEO Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Benefit Principles Policy HR 1903 is before council tonight as it captures the current processes for introducing or modifying benefits plans or programs followed by the town that were not apparent in previous or alternate policy. The policy ensures that long-term cost implications and planning considerations are factored in to any organizational benefit decisions and outlines that set of principles to govern the analysis required. Council previously received this item at the May 12th Standing Committee meeting, and the recommended action tonight is for the approval of this policy to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any questions? And if not, I'll entertain a motion if that is the will. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make the motion that council approve benefits principles policy HR 1903 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? And seeing none, I'll call to question the council approved benefits principles policy HR-1903 as presented. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Anything further, council, for this item? And seeing none, we'll move to number 7, pay principles policy HR-1902. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Council received this policy on May 12th along with the previous policies we've discussed tonight. During that meeting, council directed that the policy be brought to the May 26th Standing Committee meeting with the salary grid for further discussion on this, as well as the rescinding of personnel policy 027, salaried employees 060, and general 017. Council provided some direction at the May 26th meeting to bring the pay principles policy forward for approval, as well as the personnel policies to be brought to this meeting for rescinding. The policy itself is before council as it's required for legislative employment standards compliance and supports the town of Hinton in employee attraction and retention. And again, it also captures some of the purpose of the 3 policies that would be that are being recommended for rescinding. If council has any questions, Ms. Hope and I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any questions? Councillor Nelson.
So looking at the responsibilities within it, who and how is the grid itself approved?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. The grid is approved itself through the budget process. So any movement on the grid is included in the budget that's provided to council for the year. So I guess in turn it's approved through that budgetary process. I would look to Ms. Hope and even Ms. Fox as well as here tonight if they have anything to add to that.
I just want to clarify, are you talking like someone moving from step 1 to step 2 through the grid and staying in their grid line? Or are you talking about increasing the whole grid itself?
Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, the grid itself, and maybe I can bring into focus a little bit. I don't recall us formally approving the grid as part of our budget process. We approve a dollar amount per department for human resources. And there's, to me, some ambiguity around the ability for the grid to change and then it be presented to council as a report. So I'm struggling with and I was before with 4.1 and 4.2 is it doesn't to me clearly lay out what can and can't happen without council approval, and also just a general question about like, should we be approving the grid itself as its own item within the budget process?
Is there a question, Councillor Nelson, or was that a statement?
I was just trying to reframe for Ms. Hope.
Okay. For Ms. Hope, Ms. Hope?
So in general, grids don't really change. They're fairly established based on municipal standards, our size, our budget, our scope of control. Any grid change or increased grid change that's been happening usually is just through COLA. But when there was any adjustments to the grid that we wanted to make, it would have been through the process that we briefly follow. Well, briefly is not the right word. We did the salary review report, and then there was a report back to you guys with some of the gaps that we had, and then that was in support. So when we went to the budget process, we could say these were the budget or the money that we needed for it. So it's a really robust process that takes a lot of steps to get through. I don't have an answer.
Thank you, Ms. Hope. Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, I'm okay for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, anything further? Any other questions? Councillor Nelson?
So the one really specific scenario that I'm concerned about is if we have vacancies or room within our operational budget, does that allow administration to increase COLA within the grid without it coming to council? Because the budget dollar amount is approved, and this allows changes to happen as long as it's within the approved budget.
Ms. Olson?
I need some clarification unless Ms. Hope understands.
Ms. Hope?
I can answer that. For that specific scenario, it wouldn't, because that vacancy would only last in 2020, but the COLA would have impacts to 2020, 2021, 2022. So it would have to come to council because there's implications of that increase for future budget years.
Councillor Nelson?
Yeah, I think we've experienced as a council times where human resource decisions have been made, and then we, when we start the next budget year, those are already baked in, and we have to do increases. So I'm not sure if it was to do with pay principles or just an underestimation of the total cost of a position, but that's really what I'm looking to protect against, and I'm just not seeing the clarity that makes me comfortable that can't happen in those situations. So I'm good for right now. I'm kind of asking the same question as I asked a couple weeks ago, and I unfortunately don't have specific amendments that could be made that would really cover it off. So yeah, I'm okay for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. If I may, and I'm trying to, I think I'm following where you're going with this, and I do like it in the sense, where in what policy do we want to put when the grid comes to us from a structurally political standpoint, meaning there's nothing in place to my knowledge that says we are going to see the grid on this day every year. So I think if we want to adjust this policy or any other policy that we may have within the town of Hinton, whether it's connected to the budget, I think that's what maybe Councillor Nelson is saying, and I would have appetite for that, and I'm struggling also with what that amendment would look like. But I think adding it to this policy is one option of saying that the salary grid must be tied to every budget coming forward to council, because I can see the potential negative impact is you get a new council who's not familiar with many policies, as we have all struggled. Perhaps we add it into this one or to another policy. So I could be entertained in amending this, and I see Councillor Magoon has his hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, that was going to be something very similar to the question I'm about to pose to administration. a simple line that defines the presentation of the grid as part of the town's annual budget process. Would that best be included in this particular piece of policy, or is that something we would, best pass as a standalone direction to administration?
Ms. Olson?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. To be honest, I'm not sure. Just to paraphrase, I guess, or to restate what I'm hearing, the concern of some councillors tonight is in approving the salary grid during the budget process of each year. Is that and so the language that would be added would be to specify that that's part of the budget process as council comes forward with that, or I'm not sure if I'm understanding as well.
Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, to CA Olson, just in listening to the concerns of some other councillors and certainly myself, yeah, I think just having the presentation of that budget of that grid on an annual basis as part of the budget, so that it, as mentioned by both councillors Nelson and the mayor, is that as part of the process, it doesn't get lost in that shuffle of budget, because we all know that, sifting through budget can be certainly a very lengthy process. And what I'm hearing from my fellow councillors is that they would like to see that as part of that process, just to add extra comfort. Again, and if I'm misinterpreting any of my fellow councillors, by all means, please chime in and let me know. But I'm just trying to find ways to give that added comfort.
Ms. Olson?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I may invite Ms. Fox to support an answer as well, but the question that I do have is whether that is being brought forward in the budget process for approval or just as an information item to help council's more in-depth understanding of where our personnel costs are going. That's my main question, but as well, I think Ms. Fox signaled that she might have something to add.
Ms. Fox?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to council. So also clarification seeking from my perspective. A couple comments that were made were that HR made decisions that had impacts that council wasn't aware of. And just to clarify that process, administration actually adheres and follows the policy. The only way to make decisions outside that policy are if direction comes from the CAO. So one of the mechanisms for council to ensure that appropriate policies and practices are being followed is to hold accountability of your CAO and make sure that that person is being performance managed and that you're aware if they're following the policies or not. So that's one component, because HR does what they do and the rest of us take direction from the CAO. So as decisions are being made, maybe to go outside the grid, if that's what you don't want to happen, that's management of your CAO, not through the budget process. Because where I'm getting a little bit confused is how seeing the grid will impact the budget if the grid doesn't change. And you want to make sure, I think the purpose of the grid is to ensure that we're following a fair and equitable way of paying our employees. So giving council assurance that that's in place so that our employees feel that a fair process is being brought forward. If the budget increases or decreases, overall that has to be brought to council. You'll see the wages go up or down and you have to approve that through that process. So having council request us to bring the salary grid for you guys to go over once a year, if that's your concern, that's a pretty simple direction. I don't know if it has to be attached to the policy, but if it's something simple to review it, that seems fairly clear. The benefit or attaching it for approval doesn't really tie in for me. And if council's concerned about the hiring practices, definitely to hone in on that CAO piece for council, as that's your direct connection. So I just wanted to provide that clarity from my perspective and just make sure we're hitting the nail on the head where council wants the oversight here.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Councillor Magoon?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask administration's opinion on this. That being said, if it's a possibility and it's something that council wants, I don't know if I'm comfortable approving it tonight. So I would ask folks to refer to page 79 of our agenda package or page 2 of 4 on the pay principles policy under section 4.2. And I guess the first question is for council. If there was a line in there, call it 4.2.5, that essentially, laid out that the CAO is responsible for reporting to council anytime, or sorry, to seek approval from council in order to address any wages that go outside of the current approved grid. I guess my question to my fellow councilors is A, does that meet your concerns? And then the question to administration is B, would something along those lines be feasible given what I've sort of outlined there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. That's exactly what I was thinking. I even have it written. I wrote that earlier. 4.2.5, something that's for the CAO to bring forward the salary grid on a yearly basis to council. It's broad enough where whether it's tied to the budget report, whether it's prior, but just something formally. And I think we're all saying the same thing. As Ms. Fox said, it is the checks and balances within the budget, but as Councillor Magoon said earlier, within the budget, it's so overwhelming, I think, for many councillors, including myself, and I've been on council for over 6 years. So I think having it tied to policy, which is the duty of councillors, is to, create and rescind policies. I would be comfortable, and I appreciate Councillor Magoon, you bringing that forward. Now, my only other question before I go to administration is I just would like their input on, is this the right policy, or is there another policy that exists now that this would be better suited to be within? Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'm comfortable with the inclusion of that amendment as 4.2.5. As you stated, it's high level. It's just bringing that salary grid forward for discussion in the effort of transparency, communication with council. I don't see any issue including it here. I do know that there, and I'm not, my recollection of the CAO policy itself is something that perhaps Ms. Fox has handy that she can speak to, but I believe there's some language within that policy as well that supports some of council's concerns too. So if it's okay if Ms. Fox speaks to that.
We'll go to
Ms. Fox. Ms. Ho.
So it's pulling up right now, bylaw number 916. A bylaw to establish the role and responsibilities of the chief administrative officer, section 3.2 has language similar to what you guys are discussing, but it's more about the creation or elimination of positions, not necessarily the salary grid. So I think having that 4.2.5 in the policy, in this policy makes sense. And I'm in the process of reviewing bylaw 916.2 anyway, so I'll just make sure that the language mirrors each other.
Thank you, Ms. Hope. Council, I'm of the mindset I can go either way. If there's appetite to hold this off, but I would feel comfortable enough, if that's the will of council, to add 4.2.5 and for it to say bring forward the salary grid to council on a yearly basis for discussion. And any bylaw comes to the mayor's office to sign off anyways after, so I'd make a note that I have to sign this off to my knowledge in the coming week. I would be comfortable for that, but like I said, I'm open if we want to hash out this and other things and bring this to a future council meeting. I will await what my fellow councilors say. Councilor Magoon.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, without wanting to go too far down the road, I am almost wondering if referring this to a standing committee might be best. Again, because my concern with creating 4.2.5 would be that, it addressed that concern by, you know, addressing any budgetary impacts by seeking approval from council for any variances to the existing grid or the approved grid. But again, I don't know if regular council is necessarily the best time to deal with hashing that out in terms of wording. It would give administration the chance to, you know, draft some potential wording. And I also don't know the comfort level of our fellow councilors. So if they want to speak to it, that would give me some comfort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Okay, Council, is there any appetite for us to bring this to a future standing with amendments as discussed? And if, Councillor Nelson, you are on mute.
As I was the first one to bring up concerns, I actually don't probably have as many concerns as what was outlined at the start. There's a little bit of devil's advocate, and it comes from learning through probably some experiences that are very unique to our council and our term that, you know, if everybody was just using best practices, we probably wouldn't have experienced. So I'm relatively comfortable with it as it is, almost, but with one just piece of clarification, which is 4.2.4, where it says approval from council through an administrative report. Does that mean a request for decision, or does that mean an administrative item? It's a different verbiage than we use for our reporting template.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I can understand the ambiguity there. It would be through a request for decision. So we'd be looking for council approval through that administrative report or through the approval of the budget in the budget process.
And if I could just respond to that, that to me is if it's a request for decision and not just an information item or a report where we just accept it for information, that ultimately creates the check and balance for anything to happen within the year that is not of council's comfort. So if it has any budget implications, it has to come for approval, not just as a information item or a report. So that to me actually gives me the comfort I need, and hopefully, and I don't know if that needs to be amended to say request for decisions so that future administrations and future councils are totally clear on it. But otherwise, I'm actually pretty comfortable with this.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. To your point, though, 4.2.4 at the end it says or the annual budget process. So there needs to be. It would give any administration in the future the option to just do the general budget process, to just so there would be no check and balance other than defeating the purpose of what we originally started this conversation, is to see the grid, because it could just be embedded within the budget process, whatever the budget process may be for whatever CAO or administration. So I think that was the purpose of outlining it within policy, because unless we define annual budget process, you could just slide it in there for anything. So that's my concern, that having it specifically pointed out, but that's me playing devil's advocate to your devil's advocate there. So Councillor Magoon.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the discussion by everybody. I certainly don't think that there's been one particular line item that I've had to pay this much attention to, but it's a good one. It's a good catch. I'm just wondering then, based on Councillor Nelson's comments, and I certainly agree, and hearing the mayor's concerns, if we modified 4.2.4 to say, to address budget impacts of any changes and seek approval from council through a request for decision, period. And the reason I'm sort of thinking that is the annual budget process, that is a time to address budgetary concerns and changes anyway. Why it needs to be specified in that particular line, I can't see it right now, given, of course, any input from administration. And by removing that line, that addresses the mayor's concerns, and it still incorporates Councillor Nelson's suggestion of identifying a request for decision. Because I think you're right. If that's in there, and we see that there's going to be a budgetary impact, whether it's needing to step outside the grid or, or whatever the case may be, then it comes to council by way of a request for decision or, yeah. Anyway, that's my thoughts, and we'll see what everybody else thinks.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, I would be comfortable with that. So we would not move forward with 4.2.5 and simply amend 4.2.4 to say, as you said, Councilor Magoon, I just want to make sure we're on the same page, to address budget impacts of any changes and seek approval from council through a request for decision. Okay.
Could you repeat that?
It would eliminate every word after through on 4.2.4 and add a request for decision. Councilor Magoon, was that your intent there?
Thank you, Your Worship. It is. It's just, I'm always very, very cautious, having learned of trying to wordsmith on the fly. So I would like some comfort from administration on what their opinion on that is. If they're comfortable with that, that's great. If we need a little bit more time, then of course it's something that we can always go back to standing for.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. CEO Olsen?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Administration's comfortable with that change. Provide some clarity and comfort to council. That has come forward through discussion on this policy a couple of times. So happy to support that change.
Thank you, Ms. Olsen. Okay, council, anything further for this before we entertain a motion? Councilor Magoon?
Well then, Your Worship, I'm not sure process-wise, but I think I would like to make an amendment to the proposed pay principles policy.
Councilor Magoon, yeah.
To modify section 4.2.4 to say to address budget impacts of any changes and seek approval from council through a request for decision.
Thank you, Councilor Magoon. Council, we have an amendment.
And to seek approval, was that what you said, Councilor Magoon?
The full line would say to address budget impacts of any changes and seek approval from council through a request for decision. And Your Worship, if that's duly put, I would be comfortable making the motion that we, sorry, I just need to get it correct here. Sorry, I need to jump down to pay policy on page 69. I would like to make the motion that council approve the amended benefits principle. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. There we go. I'd like to make the motion that council approves the amended pay principles policy HR 1902.
Okay, so Councilor Magoon will have the motion will be to make an amendment as we have on the screen that Ms. Anderson.
No one has stated a motion yet, so we can vote just as his motion.
Councilor Magoon, are you okay with the language provided there? Oh, one moment.
Sorry, I guess my question is, Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure that procedurally I'm doing things appropriately. Because there isn't a motion on the floor. I guess my amendment is amending a recommendation from administration. So procedurally, I just need to know how to best go forth.
So Councilor Magoon, Ms. Anderson put forward a general motion, if you're okay with that. That motion would include passing the bylaw as amended, including your amendment within the main motion. And it's on the screen that's shared within, as it says, that council approved the amended pay principle policy HR 1902 to modify section 4.2.4 to state, and then so forth. And that would be one motion. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, Your Worship, but I need to see what the rest of council thinks as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, whether formally or informally, I'd prefer it be split into just approving the amendment and then subsequently amending the policy as a whole. It just would provide me more clarity. I'm comfortable with it, but I think having them as two separate things is probably for me more procedurally comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. I share the same sentiments. So, if we could, Councillor Magoon, if I can give you back the floor for what you would like to put forward.
Yeah, if I actually agree with Councillor Nelson in this instance. I think procedurally it's more clean. So if we can stick to the amendment first, and I'll just blame myself for getting too excited about policy. Sorry.
So if I may, unless there's any objection, can we just get a motion to put the recommendation, and then we can add the amendment to it? So I think that would be proper, probably the most easiest, because we're amending something that doesn't have a motion, which doesn't really make sense. So if we could.
We'll just amend the policy first,
So
because it's not approved.
Okay.
Or else you're
Sure.
approving the policy, then amending the
Fine.
policy, then approving the policy.
Absolutely. We just need the wording then for that.
it's on the screen.
Okay.
It should be proper.
Councillor Magoon?
Just in order to clarify things wording wise, is it that we're looking to amend the proposed policy, Mr. Mayor?
Administration?
To amend the proposed policy?
I think so.
Because typically, well, I've seen motions in a few different forms, but one would say to approve the policy as amended. This motion is doing that extra step and providing the amendment in a motion. So I would say the proposed policy, and then your next motion will to approve the policy as amended.
Ms. Olson.
Apologies, council, for for trying to wordsmith this and sort out the proper procedure, and appreciate the support on that. So the first would be the amendment to the policy, and then the approval of the amended policy or the policy as amended. That's right.
Okay, and we would just need the language for that amendment.
Is that something you would like some support on?
Is this correct what I have here?
To jump in here, so Councillor Magoon is making a motion to modify that section of, so we need to have the pay principles policy HR 1902 in there as well. So he's seeking council support on that amendment to add to 4.2.4. That would go to question first, and then the following motion would be to approve the pay principles policy as amended. Approve an amendment to the pay principles policy, and please stop me if this is inappropriate for me to support the wordsmithing. Pay principles policy HR to modify. Is that correct?
Councillor Magoon?
Yep, that is very clear for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Perfect. Thank you, administration, Councillor Magoon. So we have a council motion on the floor that council approve an amendment to the pay principle policy HR 1902 to modify section 4.2.4 to state to address budget impacts of any changes and seek approval from council through a request for decision. Council, any questions or debates? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make a motion that council approves the pay principles policy HR 1902 as amended.
Perfect. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions for administration? And seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, anything further? We have the option to rescind the personnel policy if that's the will of council. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion that we rescind the personnel policy, salaried staff 027, personnel policy salaried employee 060, and personnel policy general 017.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions for administration? And seeing none, I'll call to question that council rescind personnel policy salaried staff 027, personnel policy salaried employees 060, and personnel policy general 017. Council, all those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this action item? And seeing none, thank you, administration and council. We are on to number 8, 2020 Regional Assessment Review Board appointments. C.O. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. This is a procedural item that's come forward as earlier in the year, council appointed a staff member as Hinton's designated clerk for the West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Review Board. This employee is no longer working with the town of Hinton, and a new clerk must be appointed. Working with our partner communities, it was offered by the town of Edson to appoint their staff member to this role in support of the town during our transition. The recommended action for this item is that council appoint Tricia Pack as the designated clerk for the West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Review Board for a one-year term starting June 16th, 2020. Any questions that you may have, we'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any questions? If not, Councillor Nelson.
I'd like to move that council appoint Tricia Papka as the designated clerk for the West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Review Board for a one-year term starting June 16th, 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. Anything further, council, for this action item? And seeing none, that'll bring us to our ninth and final action item, action pending list approval.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. As the second step in our new action pending list review process, the amended list is provided to council for approval. The process starting with review of the action pending list at a standing committee meeting, the second standing committee meeting of the month, to take a look and provide opportunity for administration to ask questions and clarification, and to be transparent with council on our ability to meet the timelines that were stated or included in the action pending list along the way. The amendments in the action pending list that council's up for approval tonight are to a couple of proposed dates for completion of items, as well as the consolidation of MD 1783 and MD 1539, which relate to fees and charges for recreation and park spaces, as well as clarification and a new completion date provided to the additional parking lot on Rob Road. All items related to the recreation center have been included as status quo from the list with no changes to these items at this time. I just want to express some appreciation to council and to administration through the evolution of this new process, and to everyone's input along the way to get to a place that benefits council, the community, and provides an opportunity for administration to clarify and provide some transparency on the items that are included in the list. At this time, the recommended action is for council's approval of the action pending list as presented tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any questions? Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm once again bringing up MD 1686, and that's on page 92. So the log benches that have been removed from service because they've been damaged or they're rotten out, is there some assurance when a decision is made on new benches that the benches that have been taken away from their designated area will be replaced to their designated area.
Ms. Olson?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I believe that the process first is to complete the design and construction standards for these benches. At that point, if the question is whether any new or replaced benches would be put in the same spot that they were removed from, I believe that would be the case. Is it? I would look maybe to Mr. Vanna and Mr. Hawk if there's anything further to that. I know that there are reasons why we have benches in certain areas, and maybe they can illuminate us on some of what that is. At this point, I'd look to either one of them to assist in providing an answer.
Mr. Vanna?
Your worship, just in terms of, I can speak to the standard. So the standard is being incorporated in terms of our minimum engineering design standards. And so that work is underway currently, and as early or as late as today, this afternoon, I was in contact with the engineering firm that's doing it for us and ensure that it's being included as part of the work and that it's being coordinated with our Parks and Rec department as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vanna C. Olson. Councilor Race?
So did Mr. Vanna, are you saying that, a bench taken off of Mountain Street will be replaced with a bench when they're ready?
Your worship, I can't speak to the replacement of benches. I can only speak to the design standards. So Mr. Hawk may be able to provide that answer.
Thank you. Mr. Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair, to Councillor Race. Actually, as in one of the previous meeting, I mentioned that we have $20,000 budget and we ordered, I think, seven of those. But I don't know the exact location where we are installing or where we are replacing some of the existing benches. But we ordered 7 benches, and I think we'll be receiving them shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Hawk. Councilor Race?
Yeah, it's just, my concern is today I know where benches were. And my concern is when we do have benches available, I don't care if they're made out of straw. Will they be going back to, where they currently were? So that's just my concern.
Just to provide some clarification, MD 1686 is related to the design and construction standards and potential alternatives to be used to replace the logs in those benches. It doesn't quite speak to the placement of those. If that's something that we can provide as information moving forward, administration can look to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Councilor Race, yeah.
So would you recommend that I just send an email to you to do a follow-up on these benches?
Ms. Olson?
Through the Councilor Reese, please send me an email and we can sort out that information as well. And if anything needs to come to a further council meeting, that can be determined as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, administration and Councilor Race. Councilor Nelson?
Yeah, I think if there's a desire to have an impact on the implementation of replacing benches, maybe that's a motion that could be made to come to council, because I'm in a way of a different mindset in that we should be replacing the highest value benches. If there's benches that have been removed or in bad shape and aren't, part of bus stops, aren't close to schools and haven't been being used, I don't necessarily want to see a bench replaced there, especially, the quick math of 20 divided by 7, that's $3,000 a bench. If there's benches we don't need in certain locations, then I think there's cost saving opportunities. So if there's more discussion, debate required, I think a motion to have implementation plan approved by council is probably the way about it. Otherwise, we can just put it in the hands of administration to make those decisions. So I'm personally comfortable with it at this point, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council, any questions, further questions? And, Councilor Haas.
I'd just like to make the motion. Sorry, just let me make the motion that council approve the action pending list as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a motion to approve the action pending list. Any further debate? And seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That was passed unanimously. Anything further, Council? And seeing none, that'll bring us to our first and only discussion item. I forget what I labeled it as, the vacant peace officer position. And again, I know when we approve the agenda, I apologize. I don't like adding these items, but I think it comes at a timely manner, seeing that the position is vacant. And this is more to have a public conversation, I think, council with administration on where we are now, and to see if council wants to pivot or do anything different. That may or may not be the case. So I guess my question to administration is if we can have sort of, is there any information on where we are right now with the opening or the vacant peace officer position?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I believe Ms. Hope can give us an update as to where we are in the hiring process. She has that handy.
Ms. Hope?
Sorry, I'm just triple checking. So we had started off with posting a temporary CPO to cover a maternity leave. However, that individual has provided the town with their resignation notice. So then the posting was updated to be a permanent vacancy. It's been posted for about a week. We're receiving a lot of applicants, and I don't think it's down for another week or two. We generally only post for 2 weeks, but we can keep it open as long as we need before we find enough qualified candidates.
Thank you, Ms. Hope and Ms. Olson. And that was sort of my point. Seeing that we have a resignation in place and we're now looking for a permanent position, is there an appetite of council to hold off on this and have a broader discussion in the near future on whether we want to stay at the same service level staff-wise for this department? I personally feel this is an opportunity, potentially, if there's there's an appetite of council to reduce one position by attrition, seeing that there's a vacancy now. And this is why I wanted to add it to today's meeting, because to wait 2-3 weeks if there is appetite just creates potential interviews, etc. So with that, I want to hear from my fellow councillors regarding this matter. Councillor Race and Magoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I would need to know is the impact of not having this this position. How would that impact our service level here in town?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels, through to Councillor Race. Not having this position would definitely have an impact on the service level that's provided in that area. There's been some changes to legislation, as I understand it, for working alone. So there is the requirement in some instances that 2 peace officers respond to an item as it's received. So with that, there may be some delay. It may impact service or may reduce the kinds of services that we're able to provide. Even with but with a delay in hiring, we may see some of those impacts over some of our busiest months through the summer. I as well appreciate an opportunity if this does go ahead as a direction from council to hold off on the hiring of that position, to bring a full financial and service level report to council to have that full conversation. I would look to Chief Martins as well if there's any impacts that I'm missing just in the short term, I guess, looking at a delay in hiring, what that would look like.
Fire Chief Martins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to council. So the position isn't vacant as we speak. So the individual that gave resignation is still going to be on the parental leave until July 27th, I believe. And then we were hoping to have it filled by then, but there still will be a portion of parental leave for that position. This would bring a lot of challenges back to the department or the area of the department we originally came to council for, to help address a lot of the issues that we were currently having. Having 2 individuals, only we really struggle with overtime, sick coverage, holidays, and burnout. And because of the burnout, we were always replacing the CPOs almost yearly. The intent was to relieve the burnout, the holidays, the sick time, the coverage, and have that CPO. So that was that third CPO. So we had the coverage throughout the year. Coming into summer, that's our busiest time, I don't think that's wise to drop back down to 2. With COVID just happening, there will be a lot of holiday requests because they haven't had a lot of time off, and quite frankly, they were worked to the bone for the last 3-4 months. So we'd be even dropping further down with our level of service if we don't fill this position through the summer. And speaking to our EDO, Mr. Kovac, as of, I think, yesterday, all of our hotels had indicated to us that we could see a very, very busy summer, being that most of them are already full for their bookings through the summer. And then also with our staff sergeant's speech about how they're busy with what they're doing, it would put more stress, again, back on the RCMP to deal with the municipal bylaws that currently the 3 peace officers enforce. So I hope that adds a little bit of insight to the position, as well as the working alone, which Ms. Olson spoke to about the Ron Lazenby case on the different things that we're allowed to do, and working alone in the policy and how that works into their roles. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Fire Chief. I have Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in short, I certainly think that if it was the will of council to receive more information on this, that having it brought to a standing committee would be best to give it the full chance that it deserves.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Nelson?
If I could, I think Councillor Waugh was ahead of me in the queue.
Yeah. Okay, are you refraining? Okay, Councillor Waugh.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back when we added the third position, I had an appetite to have more of a service level discussion, and I see this as an opportunity to do so. I don't have an appetite really to talk about whether we should maintain the third position or drop it. That's not really the intent. I think this is something that's probably long overdue, and I think we need to have a full discussion for the public just about the services that are offered, the timelines, and then what impacts having only 2 people would have. I think this is the time to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Nelson, then Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, I'm really happy I let Councillor Waugh go first. It's the same thing. I don't actually really have a strong opinion either way on this, but I think understanding we're going to be going through challenging financial times, I think it's important that the public understands why we need the third officer and the impacts on the service levels. So not saying that we need to have a report as to, in order to get rid of it. It's more to help justify it and help establish that value within the community. And I think that's a great opportunity for everyone. And I too, if somebody wanted to make a direction to bring a report to council prior to filling the position, I'd be fully in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Hawes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and I'll be an advocate for the 3. Yeah, and I would love to see the service level discussion. And I feel the same way as Councillor Nelson, to have that discussion publicly to help the community members understand what level of service we're at right now and the need for. But regardless of that, I think, to those, to the Mr. Martins, regardless of the service level, having 2 does definitely pose a lot of struggles in any department. I don't think it's just in the protective services department, be anyone not having that third person, potentially for sick leaves and holidays and things like that. And quite frankly, I don't think this is a service that we can just say, hey, this is closed for 2 weeks because we've got 1 sick and 1 on holidays. So, I still would like to see that. And yes, direction to have that report would be great. But I'd still, think that having that third is going to be a benefit in a lot of different ways to our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. So I sort of heard two things. There's an appetite, it seems in general, to have a report regarding the financial impacts and the service levels to the bylaw department as a whole. It seems like there's some appetite for getting that information for us to discuss whether it supports what we currently have, whether it's too much or too little, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I've heard a few different comments regarding the timing of this. Do we want it before the hiring of this permanent position, or do we want to seek an alternative of something else? So that's sort of now I think what we need to iron out. Councillor Hawes.
I guess my question to that is looking at our CEO. I know that there's been discussion as having, and I know with COVID and everything, but in our past budget discussion, having a look at our services, not just for protective services, but across the organization. I guess, where are we at with that? And, could, if those discussions moving forward, we look at, because I don't want to put precedent on anything, but, could we have that report or that look at it maybe early in the stages? So that's, I guess, where I wonder, can we combine the two, I guess, and not make it a separate thing?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. We're still in very early stages of that service level review through COVID. Our timelines have been adjusted. I wouldn't want to, if the receiving of that information by council, in order to move ahead with the hiring process, I wouldn't want to tie the two together just in case our timelines are don't work out that way. So that would be my concern.
And that's fair. No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I wasn't just so sure where we were at with all of that, and I figured it would be a little delayed. So,
I guess my follow-up: what would be a good timeline? I know we have a meeting. We only have two standing meetings in the month of July and August scheduled. July 14th being the first, and the other one I think is August 20-something, 25th. Any comments on what would be more ideal? Ms. Olson, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I think if this is the will of council to receive a report, administration would be in our best interest to try and get that in front of you as soon as possible. However, including a timeline to the end of August doesn't prevent us from bringing something previous to council as soon as it's ready. My question to council would be, I'd be looking for some direction on whether this position could be open until this item's brought forward. Looking at the 14th, if we were able to achieve that, to bring a report to council. If we left the position open, and I may be speaking out of turn without knowing fully the process, it would allow us, should we be permitted to move ahead, or should we move ahead with the hiring process at that point, to be able to move a little bit more swiftly. So I don't know if that's potential.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, any comments regarding that? Because I would be in support of bringing a report to July 14th and keeping the position open, where they can go through continue their process, but not officially hire someone, and see what information we get on the 14th. If we find it to be, of great importance, we can hold it off. If not, we can go status quo and continue with the hiring until further direction is sought. Those are my thoughts. Council, anything regarding that? Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, if that is, if administration could pull, I would be totally in favor of that. Keep going with the process, because I don't want to hold it up just in case there isn't any changes, but have that discussion and a better look at it, which again would justify, or help potentially justify, if and when we do proceed, why we need the 3 for the community as well and at large. So.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just need some clarity here. That report would deal specifically with this position and the service levels that may be affected, should this third position not be available. It's not going to be a big, elaborate total service report. It's specific to this one topic. Correct?
Ms. Olson?
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. That's my understanding, is it would be speaking to the, having 3 CPOs and what would be affected if we moved to 2. That's what I understood to be bringing forward. But if council has any clarification, I'd be happy to.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Council, any alternatives or anything, or are we getting close to what we're seeking? I have a very drafty motion put forward, and I'll just I won't put it forward, but I'll just speak to what I anticipate may be what we hopefully want. To direct administration to keep the position of peace officer level 1 open until a report on the service levels and financial impacts of the bylaw department is to be brought forward at the July 14th standing committee meeting. I know that's lengthy, but does that encompass or any thoughts on that? Any objections? And if not, well then, if I can give the floor to, Councillor Haas, sorry.
Yeah, no objections. I was going to say that, either make that direction or let you do it by taking over.
So for the sake of simplicity for the chair, do you mind putting that motion forward, Councillor Haas? I can repeat it.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to put that direction forward if you would repeat it, please.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. So it'd be to direct administration to keep the position of peace officer level 1 open until a report on the service levels and financial impacts of the bylaw department be brought to a standing committee meeting at the July 14th standing committee meeting. And then we'll see what Ms. Anderson got from my eloquent speaking. Councillor Hawes, would you be okay with that wording for the moment?
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Okay, Council, we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Hawes. Any input, debate, questions regarding this? Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. Just a clarifying question on report. Is it appropriate, I guess, or is it council's expectation that an information report's brought forward so that would not require any direction aside from council accepting the item as information? If there's some a particular decision that council would wish to see in there, I'm just unclear. We can bring a service level report and share that information, but it would be an information report. Otherwise, I'd accept any direction on that.
Thank you, Ms. Olson, for bringing that up. Council, it makes somewhat of a difference in scope and direction that could impact the July 14th meeting date. Do we prefer an information item report or a request for decision? Or that would be Councillor Nelson.
Because this is approved in the budget and has budgetary impacts, I don't think we could have a request for decision at a standing committee meeting. I look at it as a presentation with the goal of all of us to have it be the status quo, I think, and just have a better understanding of what that looks like and a better understanding for the community. And if that happens, and if that meeting we decide that we want to make a significant change to the budget or to service levels or any of that, then a motion would or a direction would have to be given at standing to bring it to a regular meeting of council, I think. That would be my interpretation. But to me, it's status quo with a great breakdown of why it's important to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. I do support that, but procedurally wise, we could give direction to bring a request for decision if we'd like. But I do support the information approach to it. But I don't want to sway any other councillors of their opinion. But to my knowledge, we do have the ability to bring either or to a standing. Well, the report can have a request for decision, but you just cannot make that decision until a following regular. Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michael. So we would bring a direction request forward, and then it would go to approval as regular.
Thank you for that clarity. So direction request or information, I do support an information request. Council, anyone else would like to chime in on this? Councillor Waugh.
I'm content with an info request to the standing committee meeting, and then, well, I think we'd have to take it from there.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Haas, are you okay? It seems like there's some consensus to have an information request. Can we add that to your motion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll just look at for the wording and yeah. Then I'll ask Ms. Anderson to bring it up, and then I'll open it up for any final discussion. Councillor Haas, are you okay with that wording? Okay, Council, any further debate on the motion on the floor? And with that, if I can just get it back up because it's long. I'd like to call to question that Council direct administration to keep the position of Peace Officer Level 1 open until an information report on the service levels and financial impacts of the Bylaw Service Department be brought to the July 14, 2020 Standing Committee meeting. Council, all those in favor? And that was passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, as this is a new discussion, I wouldn't have been able to preface this at all, but one of the questions I had is in our MNP organizational efficiency review or whatever it was called that was done, I don't know, maybe a year ago or 10 months ago, there's a section specific to different ideas of implementation processes for the peace officer position. Is that something that could possibly be looked at by administration to see if we could discuss it publicly, as that opportunity hasn't been presented in the past, as it may impact that discussion or future decisions?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I would have to take a look and ensure that as far as privacy and that sort of thing, that we would be able to bring it forward. If possible, it could be included as a section in the report, as long as it meets that criteria.
Sounds good. I'll maybe send a follow-up email to yourself and council with the sections that I'm referring to. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Olson and Councillor Nelson. Council, anything further for this item? And seeing none, thanks again for, again, I apologize for adding this, but I think it was timely, and we've made some good progress today on that. So with that being said, that'll bring us to our information items for this evening. Council, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Reyes.
So information package number 1 in regards to the electric car. Let me get it here. The electrical vehicle charging network. Are we as council going to have a discussion on that?
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. There is a report that's slated to come to council in July that speaks to that and seeks some council support on moving ahead in relation to that letter that was received.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Haas.
I'd like to move that we accept council information packages number 1, 2, and 3 for June 16th, 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. And then that brings us to reporting. I will start with Councillor Magoon.
Thank you, Your Worship. The last board meeting took place during a council meeting due to the time constraints of other members. I wasn't able to attend, but again, Mr. Crawford's been excellent about providing us with daily KPI updates, key performance indicator updates. And along with that, since that meeting, just a piece of capital information. One of our sprayers went down and the course is being forced to look at replacing it. It's a fairly important piece of equipment in terms of maintenance. So it's not really negotiable. It's just one of those things that's the cost of doing business. So that's my golf updates for now. And if council needs any more details or wants copies of those KPIs, please let me know and I can forward those on to you.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Community Futures West Yellowhead has been busy managing the applications for the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. The uptake has been considerable. They're still processing a lot of applications. I think there's been interest from around the region, whether that be county or Jasper or Hinton. They're still accepting applications, so anyone who needs the help and didn't qualify for CERB, please feel free to, sorry, that would be SEBA. Please feel free to reach out to the Community Futures office in Hinton and they can get you more information at that point. One last Community Futures thing is we have our AGM coming up this week and look forward to seeing what's going to come out of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. One, in regards to the library, lots of discussion happening in regards to opening, that they did start the program of the books that were already put on hold. We were not letting those go, but we've made the decision to do that. So that should be happening soon. One of the things that they really wanted to emphasize, we had some staff, of course, working. Not all the staff were laid off at the time, but one of the reasons our virtual learning numbers have been the greatest that we've ever seen in our library so far. And the staff offered a lot of different programming that fortunately are going to continue after, you know, reopening and people can physically go to their library again. But lots of discussion is happening on getting in the required PPE and protection for the staff as well. So that's moving forward. Had my opportunity to attend my first West Yellowhead waste management group. It was a good, productive meeting. It was also, you know, it wasn't discussed, but a really good, again, coming from this COVID thing, probably possibly continuing to be that virtual venue for the meeting to cut some costs and things of that nature and travel and time and everything like that. So that was exciting to hear as well. And got another meeting coming up, I believe, next week. And we should have another board meeting as well for the library. And training or different learning opportunities are coming up virtual as well. I've attended in the past an EOEP training. I'm planning on attending another. It's over 4 sessions virtual, and it's on community engagement, public engagement. So I'm looking forward to that starting again, I believe next week on the 25th and 4 dates after that. So see how that works virtually. So thank you. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Race. No, you're muted.
My ASH committee has not met for months, so I do not have anything to report.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Nelson.
This past week had our first of citizen engagement with our stakeholder engagement with the Beaver Boardwalk Committee, and it went quite well, and I'm looking forward to making some progress. And Councillor Race was wrong that she didn't have anything. She filled in for me for kind of the preparatory stage setting meeting for it. So thank you, Councillor Race. And it's been a while ago, but we had an emergency committee meeting a few weeks back, and really excited that the emergency management plan is coming to council for decision. We changed the bylaw that allowed the committee to make that decision, but I think it's going to be great for the public to see what this plan looks like and get almost the stage of regular council. I think this is something that a lot of other communities are probably going to look at as an example. So everyone that's been involved with this, I'm excited to show it off when it comes out, because it's quite good. And I think that'll be coming in the next few weeks for approval at council. So that's all I have. And I just also want to thank the staff at Community Futures. It's been a really hard time seeing business struggle, but also a really exciting time being able to be an outlet for really helping businesses get through it. And it's been really emotional roller coaster for all of the staff, in addition to all the things everybody's dealing with their families, with having the office closed and be appointment only. Like it's a group that has had a million different variables and has really supported business moving forward into what will be a challenging time. So hats off, and it's going to be a continued absolute pile of work for everybody. So thanks to that crew. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Thanks for bringing up Bebo. Great meeting with the Whiskey Jacks and first of many. And I think we have the mindset of really working with the community to make sure that we get this right from a collective standpoint. So a great start. Our administration is working with Alberta Environment and Parks, so there'll be more updates in the near future regarding that. But our goal is to move forward in a productive, and efficient, and timely manner. So that covers it for Bebo. CAO recruitment, high-level update, interviews potentially in the next coming weeks, and maybe a final decision. Ballpark. We have nothing official. Maybe within 6 weeks. So an update to the community on that is still moving forward. And that covers it for myself. And with that, our CAO.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I have actually a few things to speak to this evening. The first is to assure council and the community that we are working on our reopening plans for our municipal facilities. And to start with, we're looking at opening the government center on Thursday. Please note that there's modified hours moving forward for the next couple of weeks. So Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 3. We want to ensure that our safety protocols are received well by customers and staff, and that we haven't missed anything. We have been using checklists and guidelines and developing those tools to provide for the safe reopening of our facilities. We're going forward with the government center to see how well those checklists and guidelines have worked. And as soon as our dates for other buildings for relaunch and reopening are known, we will be doing full communications out to the public to advise them what to expect. Further, the recreation center, as everyone knows, was permitted to open last week by the province, so those restrictions were lifted. However, as we explained as administration presented at the council meeting last week, administration has taken the opportunity through an extended closure through COVID to accomplish some maintenance that was planned for the annual September shutdown. So we've been working hard to alleviate the need for a September closure. So reopening dates are being determined. There isn't anything really to share there yet, but as soon as we know, we'll be providing that information to the public as soon as we can. And in the meantime, administration is working on an opening date for the spray park. I know that the weather's looking to improve over the next little while. I don't have anything concrete at this point. I'm learning a lot about some of these things as well, where, oh no, you just turn on the water. Oh no, there's de-winterizing, there's checking the plumbing, checking the pumps. There's quite a process to reopening that. So again, as soon as the date's confirmed, we'll be sharing that with the community so they know what to expect, and appreciate the patience as some of the restrictions being lifted caught us off guard, I suppose. Further to that, I just wanted to provide a little bit of an update on what economic development has been doing lately. We know that COVID has had an impact to our economic or our business community and the economic health of our community. So our economic development officer has been working through an interview stage of a COVID-19 business impact survey. And over the next 2 weeks, the data is going to be tabulated and recommendations will be developed from that. Once those recommendations are developed, they'll be shared with council and local support agencies as well, such as Community Futures and the Chamber of Commerce, Alberta Labour and Immigration. So they will be, we will be looking to create a economic recovery support plan to support those businesses. Further, the economic development staff has also been working in collaboration with the Chamber to write a Travel Alberta grant application for the development of a 24-month marketing plan, again in response to COVID, to support our tourism community, as well as in looking for assistance for the creation of a destination marketing organization or fund. So doing some more exploratory work on that to see what's possible and see what provincial support could be provided to creating something like that in Hinton. So that's really nice to see. That partnership with town staff and the Chamber has been really important, and it's strong. Finally, I just want to recognize some work done on the Explore Hinton website by the Chamber of Commerce. Their website goes live on Saturday. I've had a little sneak peek today and it looks awesome. It really fills a need that we have for our visiting population, as well as new residents, to find what they're looking for. This was made possible as well and supported by our communication and economic development staff, who are happy to work with the Chamber at any chance that they get to put something of this quality out to our community. So I want to thank Natalie and Matt for making that happen, and then as well to Scott and Josh to providing that support, and it's just another example of that collaboration that's so important. And that's all I have.
Thank you, CEO Olson. That's a great update. Explore Hinton is going to be, I think, unreal. It's really, as our CEO mentioned, is going to bring everything in our community to one place. So a big shout out to our staff here too, but specifically to the Chamber of Commerce for all that they have done. It's going to be quite the event. Now, my only other question, I guess, for you, Ms. Olson, I know you covered a lot there. Something that's been a hot topic, and we've had some correspondence, but maybe publicly, outhouses. Any update on when we may have a timeline on when outhouses may be open?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Michaels. I know this is something that's been discussed through administration. To speak to it at a high level, I don't have a date at which they would be reopening. It was administration's plan to have them remain closed through the summer, with the additional closures of our facilities and the sort of lack of understanding of cleaning protocols and what is expected through the province. So this time I don't have an opening date in mind, but that is something that administration has been discussing. We've got several, I guess, competing priorities in that area. It's something that we're looking at in relation to some of these other pieces, and we'll hope to have an update shortly as well.
Perfect, thank you for that. And with that, administrative inquiries. Any administrative inquiries, Council? And if not, Councillor Nelson.
They're asked to be sent written, so there is a written one. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do with it, whether we read it or whether it's just part of the agenda. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nelson. Ms. Anderson has shared this. And Ms. Anderson, or administration, we can move forward now that they're on the record.
Thank you, Mayor Michaels. On the record, the expectation through the council procedure bylaw is that an administrative inquiry brought to a regular council meeting, barring unforeseen circumstances, is expected to be fulfilled in 10 days. So that would bring us to June 26th to have, a response to this administrative inquiry. Given that the request is fairly confidential and private in nature, the information could be provided to council through an email and not part of a regular council agenda or information package moving forward. Because this is confidential and a private matter, this will be something that I would need to research and review to provide that information to council. As well, in the procedure bylaw, there's an opportunity for the CAO to seek council direction on that timeline, I suppose, and on fulfilling the inquiry in general. So I would look to council if there's any concerns on my prioritizing this over the next 10 days. If not, happy to leave it as is, and we'll seek to complete this by next Friday.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Councillor Haas.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. That was my question when I read this, is the amount of time work that need to be put. How much, because I know it's your discretion under our procedure bylaw of, but if this is going to take an insurmountable amount of time, resources, from administration on other matters, that this could be a decision of council whether or not this is something that one proceed with. So what do you foresee as, how much resources and time are going to be needed for this inquiry?
Ms. Olson?
So not a lot of resources, I suppose. Like I said, it's something due to the confidential nature would have to be undertaken by myself. And really what I was just looking for is that, and I'm honestly not sure how much time it will take. If I'm working on it and I'm prioritizing it, it might be that I can get it done within that time frame, no problem. But it may come in order to meet that timeline without really knowing before getting into it. It may take precedent over other things as well.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Council, anything else regarding this? Because the way I understand it now, Ms. Olson would try to bring forward what she can within the 10 days, and that would be it. If there needs to be more work done that exceeds the 10 days, then this would have to come back to council in the future to continue this. Is that my understanding? Okay. Okay, Councillor Nelson, are you okay? Are any questions regarding this? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Race.
Yeah, I don't know if this is an appropriate question right now, but to what end? So getting the answers to, these 4 items, where will that take us?
Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, I'll speak at a really high level. I think one of the things that council's been discussing, and we've heard a lot about through even these principal policies, is the costs of doing business, the costs of, so if we're talking about developing policies or knowing what the cost of an investigation is, could really help council in making those future decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Race? Anything further, Councillor Race?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's nothing further, it sounds like then they'll just move forward as is, and if it exceeds the 10-day threshold, I guess CEO Olson will have something for us at the next following meeting after June 26th, which would be the first week of July. Okay. Okay, Council, any other information? My apologies. Administrative inquiries? Any notices of motion, Council? And seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Council, all those in favor?